All right. Hey, everybody. This is the inaugural beginning of the typology podcast. And so I'm here, Scott Fishbuck from toolsofscott.com, and I'm with Jacie, my co-host. And today we're going to be talking about mistyping. I realize it's kind of jumping into it, and on some level, it can be good to begin by breaking down cognitive functions and type preferences and so on. But all of that information is only beneficial once you understand what typing is and that you orient yourself properly to a certain type. It's your starting point. And the more clearly we can start at a good spot, it puts you in it's sort of like the foundation for a house. We can start putting together a house, but if you have to move the foundation around, that can generate issues. So the goal today is to talk through why some people might mistype. The tests are not foolproof. In fact, they're fraught with challenges, and we're going to go through some of those challenges today. We're going to talk about what things you will almost certainly run into when you're trying to type yourself or having other people type you, or when you're taking a test, or when you're working with someone like me who does it professionally. And so let's start going through a few things. One place we could start is Jacie, can you, if you'd like, can you talk a little bit about the process you've gone through to type yourself or get settled on a type?
Well, I did do the 16personalities.com test multiple times. I did an MBTI test for the first time when I was in high school, and I got INTJ. And then a couple of years ago, I did the 16personalities.com test, and I got INTJ. And then I did a meeting with you, and I think within 3 questions, you said I was an INTJ. So it seems pretty clear that I'm probably an INTJ,
So you're thinking you're an INTJ.
maybe.
Um, so now a lot of times people don't have that experience, and so where they get the same result on a test and they get it the same result from a test expert. And when I worked with you and I typed you, it was obvious to me very quickly what type you are, but I don't think that's always the case. Sometimes when I work with people, it might be by the end of the hour that we get there. Usually I have a really solid idea within 5 to 8 minutes of talking with a person, but sometimes the lines between types get blurred and it can be difficult. And that might be based on life experience, things that they've learned. Maybe they've shored up some of their weaknesses that are common for a type. So a lot of times with personality types, they have a obvious strength and an obvious weakness. But if you've lived your life in such a way that you've allowed yourself to develop that weakness, then when I'm typing you, I'll be looking for that weakness and I might not see it. So for example, if I'm talking to an ISTJ and I'm typing him and I can tell, okay, so he has this characteristic, he has this characteristic, he has this characteristic. All of these point to ISTJ. But what I'm noticing is he's really engaging and he's really extroverted. He's initiating a lot. And that's not true for the ISTJ personality. What's going on? What's happening? And in that instance, and this happened a few days ago, and what I realized I had to think, and then I asked some clarifying questions. I was like, have you been working on becoming more outgoing and working on interacting with others and trying new things and starting new projects? So initiating energy. And then he told me I've been working on that for the last 6 or 7 years. So he's still ISTJ, but he's figured out how to work on his extroverted skills, and that's what you'll find is people are complex. People are the box works imperfectly. The box catches 50%. You can type them in 2 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever it is. Some people you have to spend more time in diagnosis. And that can happen in the doctor's office. Sometimes there's just a lot going on with your body, and the doctor has to really know what they're doing to tease out what's actually happening. And the same is true with what's going on inside your mind. So let's go through a couple potential things that might happen when you're trying to figure out your personality type. So one is self-bias, right? We all kind of know what self-bias is, or idealization. So people, and let's assume you're taking a test and you're not working with a professional. People may answer questions on a 16 personalities test or on a MBTI certified test, whatever form you're taking. People may answer questions based on how they wish to be or how they think they should be, right? And to be clear here, what that means is they're not answering accurately. They're answering the way they wish they were or the way other people wish that they were. Maybe they live in a society where being highly emotionally intelligent and super conscientious and focused is really good. So they say, so anytime there's an answer that's in between on do you like open-ended stuff? They're like, no, I like getting things done. I really do. I really like getting things done and accomplishing things and being a really good worker and being socially conscious. And so maybe they're an ENTP or INTP, but now they type as ENFJ, for instance, because ENFJs are more socially conscious and they're hard workers and so on. And as a result, they get the wrong result. And that might be a result that their employer would like. That might be the result that their friends would like or their family would like, but it's not true. And so they're now operating under the assumption that they're this type that they're not. So, and it would be like if in your mind you said, my knees are great. I have the best knees in the world, but you have a knee problem. And so you're running all the time and your knees are hurting and you're like, my knees don't hurt. I don't have knee problems. And the problem just continues to poke at you and you're not able to address it because you're a person that doesn't have issues with their knees. And it sounds kind of ridiculous when you put it like that, but that's really true with personality types. So a lot of times this self-bias can lead to mistyping.
And then I'm sure when they get recommendations from, whatever testing site they're using, they're going to be wrong. And then they're not going to work on the things they actually do need to develop, like in the case of INTP and TP, mistyping as an ENFJ, they might not focus on building relationships or work ethic.
Right. Right, exactly. Because they're like, these aren't the problems that I have. And that could be a lack of, it could be you're just super ignorant, or it could be you're desperately trying to feel good about yourself because society says being an INTP isn't allowed. And as a result, you just stay in this zone of muddled self-understanding, which sucks for you and it sucks for the people around you. You don't get to be the best version of yourself. You don't get to work on the things that are actually making your life difficult, and it just slows the process down. So another reason why people might mistype is they don't understand the questions that they're being asked. So the wording of questions, and again, this is oriented toward personality types, but it could be, again, a situation where I'm talking to you and I say a question that's worded in a way where you don't quite understand what I'm asking. So the wording of the questions can sometimes be vague or open to interpretation. And this can cause people to, surprise, surprise, misinterpret or misunderstand what's being asked. And then if they misinterpret it, then the answer that they give would be less precise and less true to them and less true to who they are.
I had a friend send me an autism test one time, and I messaged her telling her that the questions weren't very specific, and she was like, I think you're autistic. Like the fact that you're questioning the accuracy of the autism questions might mean that you're autistic. But I feel the same way about the 16 personalities test because they're very abstract questions, which I'm sure you're going to get into as well. But I can imagine for more concrete types, it would be a little more difficult to get an accurate response on those tests.
Yeah, and that's a good thing too, by the nature and also the way that they describe the actual test results sometimes make people feel like, for instance, if you did ESFP and someone was an ESFP or maybe an ENFP, and they talk about being really in tune with your feelings and just really, and it's not leaning into the logic. And in our society, people say, guys should just be tough and solid and strong, and then you get this personality type, and it says you're really attuned to your feelings and you know how you feel and you're expressive and you're this and you're that. And then there's going to be this visceral reaction, especially if you've been brought up about in this whole, be a man, be tough, be strong. And then they'll be like, no, this is way off. No, I don't do that. And the way, but it's still accurate, but they won't accept it because it makes them feel less, it makes them feel weak or slow. And it's possible, with women, with again, so this is going into external factors that would influence a mistype. Maybe you're a woman and you don't like the idea that you're more dominant or more assertive, right? And maybe you get a bunch of pushback in your life about that. And so you're like, well, I'm actually really caring because you wish you were caring, or you wish it was easier to be more soft in your approach, less intense. And then you're thinking back to all these negative experiences you had. And so when you're answering the question, you're avoiding pointing at the thing that makes you feel bad. And so the feelings and societal expectations can influence how you take the test. So again, sort of contextual factors. And so let's go a little further into that. So people's behavior changes, and this is a little broader than what I'm bringing up. People's behavior changes in different environments or situations, you know, duh, of course. For example, someone might answer based on how they are at work, which could be different from how they behave in social or personal contexts. And that's totally fair. I'm sure you do. We all do that. When we're going to personality types, what we're looking for is what you do when it's easy, where you don't have to consciously choose to be a certain way, where you're just going to do the thing that you naturally do. That's a core preference. That's something that would fall under the umbrella of personality type. That's your make and model. That's the thing that you naturally do. It's simple for you. It's straightforward for you. And then you could make another circle around that and call it the contextual self. So when I get on podcasts and when I'm talking to people on a call, I up my energy level and I tend to be a little more assertive and a little more directing than I am at any other time in my life. So my contextual self might look more extroverted and might look more directing. It might look a little more authoritative than how I am the rest of the day. The rest of the day being the other 90% of the day or 80%, depending on how much time I'm spending on coaching calls or presenting and leading groups and so on. And this will be true for anyone. So remember, when we're doing the personality test or when we're having a discussion about personality types, like a one-on-one, then you want to look at the things that you would do anyways. You would do regardless of the environmental stressors or things that are pushing you one way or the other. The things that you do naturally, where you don't have to consciously choose to do them. So for instance, for me, for an INTP, that looks like I want to think and analyze things all the time. That is like breathing. And so that's a strong push for me. I don't have to work to do that. I will be doing that almost all the time, right? And so INTP is a type with introverted thinking at the top, which is a judging function that evaluates whether things make sense or whether they're true. So I guess a question for you, do you notice this separation between, I guess, your core self, we'll call it, the real personality type and the contextual self, which is how you operate in different environments?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me, it's very stark. Like at my core self, my natural self is very introverted. Like I would be happy to not interact with a single person all day, most days. But I go to conferences quite often, and when I do, I'm really great at networking. Like I just turn on all of the things that make me great at networking. I'm very personable. I am initiating. I go up to strangers and introduce myself. And it was kind of wild to watch my friend see me in that situation for the first time because she knows I'm very introverted. But the first time we went to a conference together, she was like, "You're really good at networking." And it's interesting how you can leverage your different functions in different situations like that.
Yeah, and also it sort of focuses back on the fact, and I just want to bring any listeners back to the fact that when we're talking about core, what we're looking for is core. What we're looking for is not networking, Jacie. We're looking for quiet, thoughtful planning, strategic, behind the scenes, Jacie, orchestrating, doing INTJ things. And and so it's important. So what that might mean is it's helpful to have people that know you in multiple contexts that can see the common threads, see what she's like most of the time when things are right, when things are safe, when things are good, when you're living in the world that seems natural to you. Let's keep rolling. So, another thing that can influence mistyping is recent life experiences. I'm sure some of you have heard of the recency effect. And so essentially what it boils down to is the first thing you see and the last thing you see are the loudest things in your mind and attention. So a person's responses could be influenced by temporary emotions based on recent events. So that might be stress, trauma, excitement. All of these can skew results. And the person might respond based on their current emotional state rather than their usual personality. And again, just for reference point, we'll call that core self. Your actual personality type, not what you're trying to be, not what you wish you could be, what you will do naturally without thinking. That's what we're looking for when we're typing.
That's interesting. I have a friend, he has a chronic illness and he's tracked his MBTI type on 16 personalities throughout his illness. So like for many years, like the past 7 years. And before he got sick and after he got sick and during, he was getting different personality types each time he took the test. And he's kind of been tracking his like mental and emotional state through his illness by taking the test. And interestingly, he was still mistyped by the test. He's come to the conclusion that he's a different type than the test was telling him. But it's interesting to see how varied his responses were depending on his health.
Yeah. So obviously I've lived a long time. I've been a human for a couple decades, and I have experiences that I remember loudly and clearly. They didn't happen every day. They didn't happen all the time, but I remember them. They stick out to me. So one was when I got trapped outside on the porch and I got stung by 9 hornets. I remember the number. It was extremely painful. I remember it. I tried to find and destroy as many hornets as I could years after. Um, and so imagine that, and let's say instead of hornets, it was I felt really intense feelings. I felt really, really sad, or I was really, really angry, or something like that. And now I'm taking the test, and let's say that happened yesterday. So now I'm taking the test, and I think, yeah, I do respond emotionally to things because it happened yesterday, and I remember that. And so the recency of the event or the loudness or the intensity of the event is what's pushing your results in a specific direction when in reality If someone else looked at your life, they might not say, they might say, Scott experiences emotion regularly, but if you work with him over time, he tends to be this way and not that way. And so you can mistype because of a recent emotionally intense event, or on the other side, maybe you were super, super, super efficient yesterday because you had to get things done and you had procrastinated a long time and you're like, let's go. And you got all sorts of things done. You did this, you did this, you did this. You had a perfect schedule. But the remaining 29 days in the month, your schedule was loose, it was flowy, it was somewhat disorganized. And then suddenly you turned it on at the end. And then the next day you took the test and you said, I am crazy efficient. I get stuff done so fast. And you're like, yes, yes, yesterday. And so it's important to weigh things properly, I suppose is the right way to look at this. Okay, let's keep rolling. So overthinking the questions, and that's something that I might do, or someone that's more analytical, or someone that doesn't like being pinned down by a question also. So they'll think, I'm 19 different ways, and you're trying to make me pick one thing. How dare you, test? I'm a unique human who's all sorts of things, and don't impose your boundaries on me. Maybe an ENFP would feel that way, or an ESFP. So the people that like exploration, openness, and expansiveness. And now it's being curtailed by this dumb test. This dumb test is telling me I'm not logical. I was logical 3 days ago. I remember it. I did this, 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 and that. And so there's this, so they're thinking, what is the question asking? And then it kind of flows into the second one we did where you misinterpret or you don't understand the question. But and I don't know that we need to expand on that too much. It's just you're not going from your gut. You're not trying to answer objectively. You're like, well, it could be A, and sometimes I'm like B, and so really the way you should be answering these questions, if you're able, is sort of a weighted average. So one, you could think about it if you know yourself well, you could say, how am I most of the time? And then you answer that question. But some people don't really know how they are because they're so focused externally. They're focused on other people. They don't remember too much. The past is sort of like with extroverted sensors, they have a weaker understanding of their personal past and history. And so in those cases, it might be good to get an external person to provide objective data that can help them select an answer that's truer to themselves. Test fatigue. So some of these tests are really long, like 100. That's why I kind of like my process, because you can do that sucker in 5 minutes, and it's accurate. So you can get it done. Now test fatigue, this obviously is exclusive to testing. I want to say the Myers-Briggs type indicator, the really famous one, is I want to say just short of 150 questions, each of which would require self-evaluation, thoughtfulness. How much energy do you have? Do you really have time to do 150 questions? Especially if you're a really outgoing, gregarious person. Now you have to sit down and look at this screen and take this test, and then at a certain point you just start putting C for everything. Well, what kind of result, right? We kind of know how that goes. If anyone's done that, I've done that before. I don't do that often, but I've done it. And I was just like, screw this. I'm out of here. And I just put C probably for the last 12 on the test. So test fatigue is a thing. So you want to stay sharp, stay focused. And then we have false dichotomies. So this might fall under overthinking the question. It could, go into misunderstanding the question. False dichotomies just means it's a poorly written test, or they're either or in a way that's clunky and unnatural. Now, at the end of the day, some people are different, and so they're not going to be extremes all the time. So some questions are always going to feel a little clunky. Hopefully, you get fewer of those. Some personality tests present binary choices, so introvert, extrovert, and that can be problematic because you're not just introverted and you're not just extroverted. We just talked about this with Jacie being an excellent networker when she turns it on. So again, remembering core self versus contextual self. is really important. So what are you usually like? And then forget about the outliers. Forget about that one day you stood up to the bully. Or are you trying to fight people all the time? Is that, are you aggressive and conflict oriented? There's that one time you did it. So you won't say you never do, but really you probably should say you almost never do it because it happened once and you've lived for 30 years. Or maybe it happened twice. If this is happening once a month, that's a different answer. If this is happening every week, well, hopefully you're not fighting with people every week, but you can see the differences. And so, generally speaking, it's good to have rough estimations. So, I do this most of the time, I do this a lot of the time. Yeah, so that's another way it can go bad. I don't know that there's a lot more to explain about that, but it certainly can lead to confusion and inaccurate responses. Moving on, unawareness of true behavior. So, duh, of course. People are simply unaware of their true patterns of thinking. And this could be because of self-delusion. You really don't like the like again, we don't want to be things that are unacceptable or weak or lame or bad. We want to be good, powerful, awesome people. And so we have an idea of what that might be or what we should be. This kind of goes into answering it like you should or how you wish, kind of that idealization energy. And it can be helpful to recognize, maybe you are a little more disorganized in your external environment, but maybe what that means is you're highly oriented and focused on your internal environment. You have a clean thinking machine going on between your ears, but you lose sight, you lose track of your physical environment. And so when it's asking, are you messy? If one of the questions came up, are you messy? Maybe you are, but maybe you say, I don't want to be, I'm not messy. And now you're answering based off of how you feel and not necessarily what is accurate. And that can be another reason to mistype.
I think a lot of
Can,
people admire the traits that they don't have. Like we devalue our inherent traits because they're easy for us, they're not hard to do. And so we don't value them the same as traits we see in other people that are difficult for us. Interestingly, I had ChatGPT type me recently. I asked, based on my history, ChatGPT, can you tell me my MBTI personality type? And it narrowed it down to INTJ or INFJ, but it leaned towards INFJ because it said that I wanted a harmonious life. And the reason that it said that was because I asked ChatGPT a lot of questions about how to word emails diplomatically because I don't have FE. That's difficult for me. And so I'm asking it for help in the area I have difficulty with. And so it's interesting how that biased ChatGPT to say I was an INFJ because clearly I'm very concerned about FE, but I'm concerned about it because I don't have it. It's not easy for me to access.
some functions just seem cooler. Everyone likes the idea that, they're really stable and steady. I remember there was this one woman I worked with, and when I worked with her, she was really intense and she was super engaged and really focused on getting things accomplished. And then I remember one day, so very busy, very work oriented, very work focused. And I remember one day we were chatting and I wasn't talking to her. I was in the group of people talking. And she said, I am really chill and extremely easygoing. And I was like, huh, that's that's how I don't know that and I'm not gonna hop into that one. And I didn't. But I just thought to myself, that is incredible. Like I would like to bring people around her that are really easygoing, and I wonder what she would think of those people. I wonder, and it's sort of so that's why it can sometimes be interesting to see people that see themselves very differently than how others might perceive them. And so another point of these tests is it can be really, really helpful to get a second opinion, someone who's looking at you from a completely different lens. You would think it would be simple and easy to type your spouse or your parents but sometimes you're so close to them, you've determined how they are in your mind. I remember for a really long time, I typed someone that I was extremely close to, a member of my family, as an ENTJ. I was like, that's definitely what he is. And at that point in time, I hadn't learned a lot about typology. It was probably maybe a year into my study, and I was just seeing extroverted thinking at work, which is the dominant function of the ENTJ. And then years later, so in my mind for years, it was like he is, wow, ENTJ, that's incredible. That's so cool that he's so good at that. And then there was this one year that we had a long family vacation, and I saw so many feels all the time. And I was like, oh, I was wrong. And so we can be too close sometimes to and he's an ENFP 100%, which also uses TE in an optimistic slot. So TE child, so the third function down is extroverted thinking. So I can see why I got it wrong, but it was absolutely not right. And I try to make as few of those errors now as I'm able. And in order to do that, you kind of have to take a step back from your thinking and allow other people to provide perspective. You're still in the driver's seat. You're still going to answer the questions. You're still going to figure it out for yourself, but you're getting some perspective from people around you. And then that pool of perspective can weight how you view yourself and help you avoid those blind spots. Like the woman that was very she was like, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go. And I've been with her on her days off, and she's still not easygoing. And I want to be clear, this is someone I knew like 15 years ago. This is not a recent person. In case I don't know, I wonder if there's a friend or someone or family member who's going to think I'm talking about them. I'm not. This was a coworker. And no, I suspect none of her friends and family would likely tell her you're one of the most easygoing people that we know. It's and that's kind of how she saw herself. And that may be because, like we were talking about earlier, there's a deep desire to have that, to feel chill and calm. But to be fair, the chill, calm people aren't getting tons of stuff done all the time because they're too busy being chill and calm. So there's always trade-offs. And like Jacie was saying, sometimes we devalue our strengths because we have them, we're used to them, and we kind of wish we were a little bit different. And then this last one is test design flaws. This one's harder to talk about, and certainly it's not one that a taker of the test could really address, but to be fair, it would result in mistyping. So, and it's just true. I would hope that 16 personalities and there's a number of tests. There's the human metrics test. There's all sorts of things that are doing the same thing, which is essentially differentiating you based upon a percentage between E and I, N and S, T and F. That's kind of what they're doing. That's not how I do it. I do it based on temperaments and interaction styles, which I found to be more accurate, but it requires hands-on interaction. So tests can be really beneficial about starting the brain rolling on what is my personality type. So I don't hate personality tests. I just find that you end up getting the quote unquote right answer probably in the order of 50%, maybe 60 in some cases. And I don't want to put a big thumbs down on the tests. Remember, there's 16 types. So if you're wrong half the time, that means you're a lot more right than you're wrong. So if it were just chance, then that would be a 6% chance of getting a correct type. So the tests are certainly doing something useful. But how much precision and weight will you apply to those tests? And that's where I would say, don't believe the first thing that you get for all of the reasons that we've discussed today. Be curious, be interested, get external factors, think about your own personal motivations. Am I desperately wanting to be a type that's different than me? Am I being objective? Did some crazy thing happen yesterday and I was really sensitive to it and that's influencing my typing? All the things we kind of talked about. And I guess I'll just label them one last time. So we have self-bias or idealization, misunderstanding the questions, contextual factors. So I'm different at work. I'm different on Friday. Recent life experiences. You were really sad for the last month because something difficult happened in your life, but you aren't that way typically. Overthinking the questions. So desperately trying to get the perfect answer when you really should probably just go more or less with your average, what you're like most of the time. Test fatigue, you just get exhausted. It's too much work. It's boring. It's tedious. I don't even know what these guys are answering. This doesn't make sense to me. False dichotomies. I'm not just an extrovert or an introvert, thank you. I do both, and everyone does. We all do a little bit of both. In fact, I would argue it's very healthy for introverts to develop their extroverted functions. So for an INTP, that would be extroverted intuition, extroverted feeling. It's important for an INTP to care about how other people are feeling and to explore possibilities and connections. Those are both extroverted and they're both things that are important for an INTP to live a healthy life. Then we have unawareness of true behavior. So again, this is where it would be useful to have people outside of you to reorient you in a way that's a little closer to true. Because at the end of the day, if we get a result that's wrong and we make leaps and bounds based upon bad input, then we're stuck with bad output. And so it's important that insofar as you're able, you get this right. Like if you go about fixing a car, but you misdiagnose the problem, it doesn't matter that you did the thing right. You didn't find the original issue with the car. You still have a car that's not running right. And this can happen with physical stuff, this can happen with mental stuff, emotional stuff, spiritual stuff, organizational. It can go just about anywhere. And and I know that it's a lot. We covered a lot of stuff. And I would imagine at some point you zoned out because you're like, this is way too much information for me to take in. If you take in any information, I would say you have used your time well. Anything that can orient yourself towards a little bit more self-awareness, a little bit more connecting with external feedback, a little bit more knowing what your baseline is, and thus allowing you to see what your superpowers are, your gifts, your abilities, the things that are effortless and easy for you that might be difficult for other people. Knowing these things consciously, not just subconsciously, is extremely beneficial, good, useful, etc.
We do a little bit of Q&A.
Yeah. Yeah, let's do some Q&A.
Okay, do you think that there are certain types that are more likely to get an accurate result from the test, or certain types that are more likely to get an inaccurate result from the test?
I think, just based on what tests require of you, I think it will be easier for abstract types to get roughly the right answer because it's most of the tests are asking abstract questions. Are you introverted or are you extroverted? Well, you have to kind of know what those things mean before you answer the question. Those are both abstract principles. So I would venture that there's more accurate typing on the abstract. And what I do notice is it also helps when it's pragmatic types because they're less prone to idealization. So two of the problems that you have with testing are societal influences that tell you you can't be a certain way. And if I'm really keenly aware of those things and I don't want to be them, I'm going to answer the test in a way that makes me more socially appropriate, more effective, more cool, whatever it is. And those aren't bounded to truth. They're bounded to meeting external expectations and saying the good thing. Like, I don't want to be a doctor, but my family wants me to be a doctor. I'm going to be a doctor. I want to be an extrovert. I want to be efficient. I'm an ENTJ. I want to be, and so you find that you get fewer mistypes, I find, in the NT column and probably the STJs. When STJs and NTs test, they tend to get it right more often. And what I do find with the NFJs and NFPs, which would be in the idealist category, they'll often type as themselves. So INFJs type as ENFP or INFP, ENFJ types as INFP. So they'll stay roughly in the right category, but they'll mistype in that close proximity. And let's see, with ESFP and ISFP, ISFPs know themselves really well, but the tests are kind of weird. I would say they don't mistype a lot. ESFPs will mistype frequently because the test is boring, it's tedious, it's not hands-on, it's super abstract, it's all the things that they hate. So if they do one at all, it's quick and let's get this over with as soon as possible. And so they'll type as all sorts of things. They'll type as ESTPs, ENTJs, ENFPs. I've seen probably 5 or 6 different ones for ESFPs. They're probably the most diverse of all the types so far, from my experience.
And why do INFJ men mistype as INTJ quite often?
Yeah, and this is totally fair. So I actually think this makes sense, and I think this is a testing problem. I don't think it's the INFJ's fault. So INFJs have introverted thinking as their third function. So that is a personal sense of what is accurate, true, and factual. It's not actually looking to other people to validate that. It's internal. So INFJs, even though they have an F in their type, are in fact thinkers. So that can be a little bit confusing. And INTJs have that T in their stack. And both INFJs and INTJs are both dominant introverted intuition, and both their fourth function is extroverted sensing. So they have crazy high abstraction tendencies and low concrete tendencies. And since the INFJ is in fact thinking about things quite often, if the only thing you're looking at is thinking versus feeling instead of introverted thinking versus extroverted thinking, then you can easily mistype as an INTJ. And what I've noticed is this is way more common with INFJ males than females because I would say men in general identify more with being logical, precise, and so on, just because that's sort of what society looks for in men. So if the test is only looking between T and F and not trying to distinguish introverted thinking and extroverted thinking, so an INTJ has extroverted thinking, then they'll mistype. And I've seen that mistype. So of the INFJ men that I've typed, which is I think 11 or 12, probably just north of half have mistyped. So probably I think 7. And of those 7, 5 mistyped as INTJ. And so that's a common one. And I just want to be really clear. I think it's the fault of the test. And, there might be a little bit of self-awareness issue there, but I don't think there's too much. INFJs are very thoughtful and they think a lot, more than people would expect. So they're warm and cheery on the outside, but on the inside, they're calculating. They're sizing you up, really. They're just sweet and soft externally.
And do you think on some of the tests that the most common letter that would be mistyped is the I versus E?
Yeah, I think so. I think I versus E can be a challenging one. And I think it's the least problematic of the mistypes.
So if an
Uh,
ENFJ were mistyped as an INFJ, you think that's close enough?
yeah, you can get, because at the end of the day, they have the same cognitive functions. So the general recommendations you would give to an INFJ are generally the same as the ones you give to an ENFJ. Some of the blind spots and issues that an INFJ would have, ENFJs have them too. They won't be to the same degree, and that's the problem. That's the issue. But at the end of the day, it's the same general recommendations and it's the same best practices. So in the case of an INFJ and an ENFJ specifically, give them freedom. Don't tell them what to do unless they ask. And then and then they're asking you to tell you what to do, so you're still doing what they want. And ask them what they think. And this would be more important for an INFJ and less important for an ENFJ, but important for both because they're both introverted thinking. They both care about what they think. And if you don't ask them, they'll feel misunderstood and they'll be annoyed. And then they won't tell you because FE is really high and they don't want to be conflict oriented. So if you told someone about either of those, that will work in either situation, and it would just be more important for an INFJ, but it would still be important for an ENFJ. And then also it's important for them to surround themselves with people of good moral character because they have extroverted feeling, and both of them would benefit from that. I'm sure everyone would benefit from it, but it's more important for the extroverted feelers to be around high moral character because they just absorb it. They're social mirrors. Extroverted feeling takes in the values of their society and determines what people like, what people care about, what's good and what's not. And if they're surrounded by bad people, then their morals will become slowly atrophied. And so it's important to get the bad people out of their life, the losers or just the sick stuff, the non-good. Just get it out because they'll soak it in. FE people will soak in the values of the people around them. So you'll notice that the suggestions remain roughly the same. So that's why introverted versus extroverted is probably the least bad of the mistypes.
So it sounds like the tests are sometimes useful, especially if you can have a lot of self-reflection or alternative perspective when you're taking the test. But ultimately, the recommendations are only as good as the answers that you provide. And so it might be beneficial for people to look to alternative sources of affirmation of what their type is. So whether it's pulling like the people around them, I know that in the past, I've taken the MBTI test for someone else that I knew really well who kept mistyping. And it was an interesting experiment because I think I got to the correct type. And the reason I think that is because recently I did one of your workshops where you taught us how to use the preferences to type people. And the MBTI test that I took matched the way that I had typed them with the preferences. So there's different ways that people can be typed. And for me, as an INTJ, I'm all about the efficiency. So I would say the most efficient way that I've ever been typed was when I did that meeting with you. And it was literally within 3 questions. You pinned me. You pinned me down. Kind of secondary to why you would do the test is really so that you can get recommendations for self-development and also improving relationships. I know that's a big reason why a lot of people want to understand their type is they want to understand themselves better, they want to understand the people around them better, and they want to improve those relationships. And I know that you offer one-on-one coaching, don't you, Scott?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good time. What I like about one-on-one coaching is it kind of adds a lot of variety to my day because I don't get the same personality type all the time. And what that means is I change my approach insofar as I'm able to accommodate their preferences and needs. And I like doing that. So it's a good time. I don't know. I've spent so much time learning all these things. It's nice to be able to give back. And then when you can make things easier, it just makes everybody happier. That's kind of that's the purpose of the calls. And yes, I do them.
Definitely, if you're interested in learning more about your type, if you want to double click on what the tests are telling you, I highly recommend booking a session. They can do that at toolswithscott.com.
Hmm. All right, everybody. Thanks for showing up. Thanks for listening. I hope this is really helpful. So the goal here is just to provide more clarity to your life and make things easier and better. And if there are topics that you're interested in, in my heart of hearts, Q&A is my favorite. And so I like doing random specific topics. And I'm happy to move forward based upon the whims of the tribe. So if there's something special or interesting that you'd like to hear discussed, I'm happy to cover it. And otherwise, I just hope you have a really great week, and we'll catch you next time.